Sector feedback has resulted in significant change to the government's essential freshwater package, but there is still a sting in the tail. That's what Dairy NZ have come out saying today. The government have parked the DIN, the dissolved inorganic nitrogen measure, and that was very controversial, and removed the impractical and expensive requirement for farmers to move existing fences that they'd already just gone and put up another couple of metres that way to meet these new stock exclusion guidelines. I tell you what, those high country sheep and beef guys were not happy about those. There's two issues were of great concern for farmers, so this will provide reassurance. But there is still so much uncertainty. Of course, it's not formed in regulation right and in law, but it will be soon. Kate Scott is the Managing Director of Landpro and a Nuffield Scholar specialising in environmental management. Welcome, Kate. Firstly,
thanks for having me along.
How's the weather in Cromwell?
We've had that beautiful inversion layer for the last week or so. So I wouldn't say it's probably the best weather in the country just at the moment. A little bit cold.
I do not miss that fridge. It's a hot...
No, I don't miss that either.
It's horrible. Let's start. What are you glad's been taken out?
Look, I think overall I'm pleased that we've seen that postponement of the DIN, because I think there was a lot of uncertainty around what that meant for farmers. I think a slight easing on some of the timelines for implementation is a good change, because that was certainly one of my concerns as a practitioner is how are we actually going to resource to deliver on some of these outcomes for our clients. So I think, overall, I think there's been some good changes made as a result of the consideration of the submissions. But like all good practitioners, I probably have a few residual questions around what's going to come in the detail of that National Environmental Standard and that National Policy Statement, because like all good documents, the devil is usually within the detail. So I guess we wait to see what comes in the drafting in the next phase of that.
There seems to be numbers bantied around that there is some assurity of what's coming, and it's very much around any further intensity of land use with dairy and a real pulling back and cap of nitrogen use. What can you explain about that?
So what they came out with in the original proposal was controls on intensification of land use, and those have largely remained. Although they have, I think Elizabeth also mentioned it when you spoke with her earlier, they've removed some of those constraints around horticulture, for example, and they've kept the arable out of it as well. So they're still saying if you want to convert your land to dairy, for example, from another land use, you'd need to get a consent to do it. And they're not saying that you wouldn't be granted consent, but they would expect to see considerable environmental benefit that attaches to that. And they also talk about within the document catchment offsetting in that sort of a scenario, but I haven't seen any detail to highlight what catchment offsetting might look like or how in fact it might operate. So I guess at a high level they're signalling those things could still potentially occur, but how, we don't really know.
We do know the intensive impact on our environment from dairy, but why is horticulture and arable left out of this?
Well, look, I think partly when you read the documents that have been released, some of that's around ensuring food security, about making sure that we can continue to grow the nutritious, fruit and veggie and crops that we all need to feed ourselves and to feed the world. So I'm sure that's probably been a big part of the consideration around leaving that out. And look, for the most part, their footprint is a lot smaller than some of our other more intensive land uses.
But over a smaller footprint, higher nitrogen leaching, and that came from a Canterbury market gardener who told me that. So, I mean, like in the Canterbury, Selwyn, Hines zones, farmers are already sort of working towards a 30% reduction in nitrogen. And we were speaking with Liz earlier and this is the place you play in hugely, is around regional councils and how they differ across different parts of New Zealand. Is this move to a standardisation of what good is happening in some regions to be across all positive?
Look, I think, again, it will come back to how they try to standardise it, because we have to recognise that every region actually has regional variance. So I think if you can have a standardised approach per se, but flexibility for regional differences, then we might get a good outcome from that. I think for me, when we look at some of the detail that's within what's proposed and the future RMA amendments that are still to come and this, water commission as an option, one of the concerns that I have is, well, how is that actually going to operate and how do we ensure that the appropriately skilled people are able to participate and that we actually get robust decisions as a result of that?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think, that's something... Yeah, I think that's something that we need to be looking at is, what is the RMA reform that's coming on the back of this? Not just looking at the detail of what's before us in terms of the proposed NES and the NPS.
Effectively, are we looking for a resource consent to farm? And if so, that's going to need to be heavily resourced.
Yeah, exactly. And look, capability within our sector is already limited in the sense that we've all got probably far more work to do than we have people to help do it. And so, as an example for you, when I look at one of the proposed changes within the NES component of this, where they're talking about land use activities for intensive winter grazing, if you're putting in your fodder crop on more than 50 hectares or 10% of your area, they're talking about, you needing to get a consent by July next year. Well, they estimate in this document that there's about 850 properties that might trigger the need for that consent. So I had a quick add up and I said, well, look, that's more than 70 consents a month that those regional councils are going to have to process. And yet we don't know where the people are to be able to process them, where the people are to be able to prepare the applications. And we're still lacking the detail on what is the consent process we will have to follow, what information are we going to have to put into an application, and how complex is that going to be? Because 70 applications a month is a lot of additional consents to be processing. So from my point of view, perhaps the time frame on that is perhaps still a little ambitious in terms of us being able to achieve that.
And on that about winter grazing, there's a bit in there about pugging depths. Who's going to be monitoring that?
Yeah, look, I'm not sure how we're going to do that, and that was one of the questions that I raised is, from an enforceability and a compliance point of view, how are we going out there to measure it, and how do we address the scenario when, for example, we have an adverse weather event when people are grazing their cows and all of a sudden, as a result of the adverse weather event, pugging of greater than 20 centimetres depth occurs. The regulations are unclear to me at the moment whether those people would have to actually get a consent in the event that might occur, or whether they would have an issue from a compliance point of view because of the adverse event they're now not complying with it. So I think that's where we're still lacking a little bit of detail around how it's to be implemented and operationally what that actually means.
The idea of moving fences further back that were already existing with 98.3% of Dairy Accord waterways already fenced off, that really was a fear of the hill country sheep and beef, where it was not practical to put in stock water systems where we had natural streams. That must be a real win.
Yeah, look, I think that is a real win for sensibility and practicality. And look, in the documents that I've been reading through today, it also talks about when the sheep and beef or the hill country farmers have to come to fencing, that they will make allowances for, site-specific constraints where there might be things like super steep country or an inability to fence an area. So it appears on first glance that they're trying to provide for some of the impracticalities that attach to fencing some of our high country.
I was just thinking about all the high country fences that I know that would be going, damn, Kate.
Exactly.
But all the farmers that were going, whew. So that's good.
Yeah,
especially at this time. We don't need any more expense, and that was an absolute major that was coming down. What about effluent systems? And being able to improve them? They're a high source of potential leaching into our aquifers and our waterways as well.
Yeah, so the regulations themselves aren't specifically addressing effluent systems. So most regional plans throughout the country are the current mechanism for addressing the discharge of effluent and the management of effluent systems. So It's pretty uncommon these days that people can discharge effluent without a consent, and through the duration of those consents, every time those farmers have to renew them, they're having to go through a process of improvement and demonstrating that they're minimising their impacts on the environment.
I have two audience questions, and fun fact, they come from the same man, and he's an intelligent man, a good friend of mine, Mr. David Stevenson. So I'm going to ask both of them to you. Kate, with a cap now being put on nitrogen, does that make overseer basically redundant, as that is what we use to calculate our N leaching?
Yeah, look, I think that's a really great question, and I guess my initial thoughts to that are the role of overseer will help us to demonstrate our compliance with the nitrogen cap. So we're doing our nutrient budgets in overseer, and we're going to be able to then demonstrate whether we are or aren't meeting the cap. But actually, overseer has improved, over the years, and now for many farmers is actually a really valuable tool in terms of that assessment of their activities and their impacts on the environment when they're understanding their farm systems or the potential for farm system change. So, look, I think overseer is still here to stay, and I think how we use it might just change slightly, in that future point when we're all compliant with a future nitrogen cap, perhaps.
I know Kate's got 3 young boys that she's quite happy will be tucked up in bed, and she's going to answer your questions, so she loves it, I know. But so I want your questions coming in. I'm getting them starting to come in thick and fast. Another one here from David, and then he can just take a wee break, but it's a good one. He's just had a read of the Fed's email. It's Arable, horticulture, what is the definition of arable? And this ties into another question from Hamish Kirk, understanding that arable that it was actually veggie growers. So David has said, in terms of this, is it anything that is harvested and taken off farm, being dairy support is a third of their farm is cut for silage, which is carted off farm, which means he's losing nutrients and nitrogen that need to be replaced at a higher rate than if grazed that third of his farm instead classed as pasture, meaning capped. So in the end, he's better off stocking up the farm at a higher rate than selling silage, which goes against what they're trying to achieve. So it's a shifting around of nutrients and nitrogen in different catchments via our current farm systems.
Yeah, look, I think I understand David's question, and I guess we don't have any definitions yet, so it's hard to understand what is defined as arable versus not arable, as an example. But when we look in the cabinet paper that was released, it does talk about the fact that the fertiliser cap would apply to all pastoral sectors, including dairy support, sheep, beef, and deer. So, on first read and without any definitions, my initial thoughts would be that where we're cutting crops or pasture, that's going to be captured by the nitrogen cap.
Yeah, we need to get Alison Stewart on the show next week to talk this over as well. Hamish, to clarify around arable versus our market garden veggies. Liv Cochrane, what is pugging? I have mental images of stacked squishy-faced dogs. That wasn't a question, but good work, Liv. Pugging, I can answer this, is when the cow's hooves go very deep into very moist soil and create big holes, and we don't really want that. The soil structure doesn't allow that, so that hopefully that is that. If anyone else would like to ask, Kate's got some questions around some uncertainty in this. We'll have her here for another couple of minutes. But Kate, I mean, overall, the message that this is sending to our global consumers is only positive, right?
Definitely. Look, I think at the moment New Zealand agriculture has this huge opportunity to stand up and potentially show the rest of the world, as well as ourselves here domestically, that the environment is a really important factor in all of our farming operations and our decisions, and that's about building on the good work we have been doing, but finding ways to effectively, how do we monetize our sustainability moving forward, and how do we demonstrate that we can produce world-class products with world-class environment behind it. So I'm actually really excited about, what the opportunities are out there for us to pursue as a sector and as an industry, I guess, to actually harness all of that.
Thank you so much, Kate. I think everybody's jumped over into What's Up with Wiggy, which is on at the moment as well. But I tell you what, all the viewers have been sitting there very engaged right throughout this entire show. And I'd like to open up and have a bit of a panel around this essential freshwater. So I'd like to extend my warm welcome to you, Kate, to be a part of that, and many of our industry leaders to go through what and how they would like this to look at, what was in their submissions, and how we can actually achieve this common goal of freshwater, which we all want as every single New Zealander around the country. I'm going to take a stab in the dark of what your river is, Kate.
Yeah, I think you'd be pretty good. It's probably similar to yours, the Matato, the Clutha River.
Yes.
So yeah, we're pretty lucky, but we also have Te Roto being Lake Dunstan. So our lake is also a special treasure for us here in Central Otago.
Thank you so much. Do you realise that I've been trying to Google the Māori word for Lake Dunstan this entire time? It actually has one. There we go. I can put it into my mihi.
Oh no, Te Roto is lake rather than that being its Maori name. Just FYI.
There you go. I'm still learning, and I always will, and that's okay because I'm a human.
Ka pai for trying. Well done.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
There's Kate Scott joining us there. She is the Managing Director of Landpro. They're very much specialists and thought leaders in the space of land management, based out of Cromwell and with offices around the country.
This is Sarah's Country.